Planet of the Apes, one of the most iconic and beloved franchises of all time. It's thematically rich and fascinating, but also, it's super weird. It is so hilariously insane and crazy, yet shockingly bleak and harrowing. It's got a lot going on. In this video today, I'll be ranking and reviewing all 10 films. The good, the bad, and the, Tim Burton of it all. Number 10, Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes. One of the least Tim Burton films that you'll ever see. Gone is the gothic architecture and emo outcast lead, and in is Mark Wahlberg? I do not understand this pairing at all. Tim Burton director and Mark Wahlberg actor is just not a fit that works or makes sense to me on any level. Honestly, Marky Mark seems like the exact type of person who would have been beating up Tim Burton in high school, prompting him to become the Tim Burton that we all know and love? I do not know what the vibes were like on set, but it feels very clear when you're watching the film that Tim Burton is more interested in the ape society and doing all this ape-related things that have nothing to do with Marky Mark, but the film itself somehow is fighting against Tim Burton's want to put apes in barbershops and having them cutting each other's hair and just jumping all over the place like monkeys. The film is like, no, focus on Marky Mark, your childhood bully, Tim Burton. Whether it was studio meddling or Tim Burton trying to, overcome the demons of his high school bullies, he really focuses in on Marky Mark, who is so painfully boring in this film, so dull, so devoid of charisma, and Marky Mark just doesn't look like he wants to be there at all. Now don't get me wrong, I love Marky Mark. He never misses. Transformers 4, Transformers 5, The Happening. The man never misses. Except for in this film in which he clearly misses. The prosthetics and mask work in this film are exceptional. There is no question about it. Rick Baker has done some of his best work and some of the best mask work in any film ever. The apes look sensational. They look so good. And that is literally the only positive I have about this film. This film is super serious. All of the humor from the original franchise is entirely gone, and I really do not like all of the new lore and mythology that they create for this new Planet of the Apes. And whilst I do respect them trying not to mimic and completely copy the original and just do that again, every single change they make, every single new addition to the lore and mythology of this new remake, I find falls completely flat and just doesn't work in any way, and in no way is a better or at least different, interesting interpretation. It's all just kind of terrible, and I particularly do not like that all the humans can speak. It might make the social commentary a little bit more subtle, kind of, but not really. I feel like it just takes away a lot of the really interesting lore and mythology of the original Planet of the Apes. And the fact that the humans have de-evolved as the apes have evolved, I just find it, yes, very blunt and obvious, but striking and powerful, and it really kind of hammers home the ideas and themes at play, and it just creates for a really interesting dynamic and universe. And it's one of the main aspects of that first film that I find really engaging. And just to completely take that away in this one, where all the humans are just speaking, I just find it to be kind of a lazy choice to have Mark Wahlberg be able to interact with all of the most dull human beings that you've ever met in your entire life. It's like, if you're gonna have all the humans speak, at least maybe make something that anybody says interesting on any level, instead of maybe the most dull and uninspired script and dialogue you've ever heard in anything ever. Just a suggestion. The social commentary of the original film, whilst being very blunt and obvious, has some striking visual imagery and some really powerful, intense ideas that it's playing with. They are quite emotionally affecting, and it's very, very intense, and it just works with being so very blunt and obvious. This film's themes and social commentary are so non-existent and so watered down, they essentially feel like they're not there whatsoever. Like a drink you buy at a club. You know there's technically alcohol in the drink. You saw the bartender pour the alcohol into the drink. Yet then when you drink your drink, it's all mixer. The only interesting part of this film is the absolutely unhinged, hilarious, iconic, maybe infamous is probably the better word, ending. This film's ending is so interesting and so crazy and so out of nowhere and so ridiculous. It baffles me. It wonderfies me. That's not a word. It makes me very excited. I can't believe a film that is so boring and so dull has an end twist, out of nowhere cliffhanger that is... It's like the most M. Night Shyamalan twist that M. Night Shyamalan never twisted. I love it so much. And I am, of course, talking about the fact that at the end of this film, Marky Mark time travels back to modern day America. But somehow, the villain of the film, Tim Roth, has got there earlier, and there's a big old ape statue of Abraham Lincoln. Ape-Raham Lincoln, if you will. The imagery of Ape-Raham Lincoln is maybe one of the most hilariously iconic and baffling and just strange and kind of awesome, but so dumb and confusing and just bewildering. It does essentially everything. It is so good as a cliffhanger. And not just that, but Marky Mark gives us one of those classic befuddled, bemused, but just like kind of nothing. Like he's shocked, but also kind of he's giving you nothing. Classic Marky Mark. He's all like, "Whoa, what's going on?" And then all of these apes all dressed in cop uniforms, and there's firefighters, and there's general apes just taking photos. The whole world has been taken over by apes, and they just surround Marky Mark at the steps of Abraham Lincoln. It is strangely alluring, the idea of this sequel. I want to see this sequel that we never got, but I do feel like it's probably one of those things where it's better in my head because just the unhinged, unbridled, pure hot garbage, madness and nonsense that film could have been. I don't want to see a film that's not as good as what that potential could be. So it's probably best left on the shelf of sequels we never got, because what film would we even get? They had no idea what they were doing. They're just like, how about this? And I say, yes please, Tim Burton, yes please. So before we fully dive into this review, I just want to say thank you so much for clicking on my stupid face, and it would mean the world to me if you could please get your stinking paws on that like and subscribe button, you damn clean, hopefully, human being. Number 9, Battle for the Planet of the Apes. I love the original franchise. I love how every single one of the 5 films does something completely new and original and different, yet it expands and grows the wacky and wild and truly weird franchise's lore and mythology. The lore is madness, and I love it. Despite a couple of moments that I find really interesting, and the setting of this I find to be a good place to have a final film, generally speaking, I find this film to be a super disappointing and completely underwhelming end to the original franchise. The 5th and final film of the original franchise ends with such a whimper. It's really disheartening and depressing. It is, I think, easily the worst of the original 5 films, and it's almost worse than the Tim Burton film. I just kind of feel like the Tim Burton film should know better. It had like 30 years of just filmmaking in general to improve and be better, and a lot of the issues with Battle are probably due to like budgetary issues, just kind of pumping out a film every single year. Each film you can kind of clearly see that the budget has gone down, so they're left with scraps, and I guess they do the best they can. I don't know. There's just like a charm to a film that was made in 73 with probably what amounts to, even with inflation, like $12.50. The titular battle that the title hypes is hilariously small scale, but not in like a really intimate, character-focused way. More in the we don't have the budget to do a battle, but let's do a battle anyway. The battle that this film centers around is apes versus humans, and it is the vague kind of inspiration for the Dawn of the Planet of the Apes movie. The human element in this film is easily the weakest part of the film. The villains in this film, the human villains in this film, might be the least intimidating and least threatening and most boring villains we've ever had in any movie ever. And that's crazy, because there's been like heaps of movies with really bad villains. They're just so nothing. The very few good moments in this film are centered around the ape culture that we've kind of come to at this stage in the franchise. We get kind of the beginnings of ape culture during the ape apocalypse, and all of the humans are living out in a little wasteland part of the city, but the apes are off in the forest, and they're like got schools going, and they're all learning English, and they're all learning that ape does not kill ape. And a lot of that stuff, particularly all the school stuff, is actually pretty interesting. It's just like there's not much of it there, and there's a couple of humans helping them out, which is a really interesting dynamic. We also have an evil gorilla. Essentially, original recipe Cobra. And he doesn't like humans, he's like evil humans. And there's a bunch of conflict between evil gorilla, original recipe Cobra, whatever his name is, and Caesar. And all of that stuff is like really, really good. There are some really good moments around the society kind of, you know, being like, ape does not kill ape. And then at one point someone's like, well, maybe ape gotta kill ape sometimes if ape sucks. And I don't know, there's some really interesting stuff that's like almost there. And I wonder if like the new films hadn't done essentially the exact same thing, but so much better developed and give so much more time to flesh out this idea of this ape society who maybe Caesar thinks that like the apes can be better, but learns that maybe apes are the same as humans in more ways than he would like. So this film almost does a lot of really good stuff, but it's just funny now that we've got the new trilogy, just how much better they handle essentially the same ideas and themes. They just enrich them in so many better ways. Yeah, I don't know. There's something undeniably charming and campy and just gloriously delightful about the apes in the costumes. They just like, you just completely buy it and like buy into this world and how it looks and feels. And that's what I really love about this film, just how it feels and looks, even though it's so low budget. If only the film had really focused on evil gorilla, original recipe Cobra, and Caesar and the ape society, but so much of this film is dedicated for like a journey into the destroyed city where all the mutant humans are, and there's just like a lot of focus on that and the most uninteresting humans you'll ever, like, I can't even visualize anything about them. They're just so nothing. So much of the film is that, which just kind of sucks. Also, this film loses points for being the only film in the original 5 films to have a happy ending. Coward move. The first 4 films have some of the most shockingly harrowing and bleak endings to any films ever. It is overwhelmingly dark. This one ends on a happy note, and I don't respect that. But it gains points for having the final shot of the original franchise be something that defies logic, belief, and just... it defies everything. It doesn't make any sense. It's super surreal and weird. It is of a statue of Caesar. An inanimate object statue of Caesar. And we pan up to the face of the statue, and the statue, the inanimate object statue, cries. It sheds a single tear. The inanimate object statue sheds a tear. I don't know what's going on there. I don't want to research what's going on there. I don't want any explanation. I just want to live in a world where it happened. Equal parts bizarre, hilarious, and true hot garbage nonsense. It is a truly spectacular way to end the franchise. Now, you may have noticed a fun trend with the endings of these Apes films and just how completely unhinged and crazy and awesome they are. Well, buckle up, because it just gets better from here. Number 8, Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. I feel like I should like this film more than I do. And that makes me sad. This film is set 20 years after Escape, and it's set in maybe the most bafflingly hilarious yet harrowing dystopia you could possibly imagine. So there was this virus, and it killed specifically the cats and the dogs. They're all gone, every single one of them. So what do humans do without our 2 most trusted and loyal pets? Well, of course, we would start to have apes for pets. What other possible outcome would there be? So we have apes for pets, and then we go, wow, these apes are real good at doing stuff. Maybe we'll make them slaves. And then we enslave the ape race. Imagine a movie about slaves. Replace the slaves, put in apes. It's that, but it's not as good as that sounds. That sounds crazy and wild and interesting. This film is just kind of like a little bit boring. I feel like this film to me is more interesting as a moment in the lore and mythology of the universe because it's so crazy and it introduces us to Caesar. And so this is the dawn of Caesar. And I think like, I don't know, without this film and this character of Caesar, we don't get Andy Serkis's Caesar. And so I don't know, I respect it a lot for that. And I think maybe if they hadn't done such a good job with the new trilogy and the new Andy Serkis Caesar and his arc, that maybe I would look at this more fondly. But I feel like a lot of things this film tries to do Rise does a lot better. So in this film, Caesar is now an adult and he's been living off in the circus for 20 years and somehow he isn't aware of the crazy, insane world that we live in now. But a lot of the first 15 minutes is kind of hilarious, baffling, just exposition. Caesar's like, what's going on? Why is the world so insane? And he's like, I am radicalized, time for a revolution. Which is fine, and sure, we need a revolution. That's not the issue. But it's just like how he gets there. He's just like, hey, all of this, no good. Revolution? It's just so brief. It's just so underdeveloped. I feel like there could be so much more to kind of push him and shape him and make him understand this world and then want to fight up against it. And maybe it is just because Rise does such a good job and it's such a more kind of realistic, if I can use that word in this franchise at all. But it just feels like Rise does so many of the same ideas of Caesar kind of being radicalized and kind of loving humanity, but then seeing this horrible side of humanity and kind of that push, that to and fro, this seesawing situation that Caesar deals with in Rise, I find to be so compelling and so heartbreaking. And they do so much good stuff. And in this, he's just like, this sucks. And then suddenly, as Caesar is kind of doing his revolution, it mostly just involves scenes of him looking at other apes. And I was just confused, like, is he doing this telepathically? Are they just understanding? But they're all just simple apes. There's never a point where he makes the other apes smart. It's just really weird and super underdeveloped, and all the human evil characters are like, where is the smart ape in this town of not smart apes? And then they're like, there he is. And then he's like, he got loose! There's an uprising! Ape riot! And the ape riot is just not as good as you'd think it would be. And I'm not trying to compare it to Rise, even though I do compare it to Rise, and the Rise one is so very good in every single way, and this just is nothing. Bunch of apes run through the city and kill like 10 guys. And it's not as exciting as you'd think it would be. Not that I would expect it to be the San Francisco Bridge fight scene that we get in Rise, of the escape or anything like that. I understand when this movie was set and the budgetary limitations and just the style limitations. All of those things I understand. I just feel like personally nothing in this film really hits home and emotionally gets to you except for the last 5 minutes. The last 5 minutes of this film are spectacular. There's a big speech and a whole thing happens. Like if you see just the normal non-uncut version, it's not very graphic, it's not very brutal, and it ends on a shockingly uplifting note. Whereas the uncut version, which I only recently saw for this rewatch, because I got the DVD, it doesn't include the uncut. I had to go to YouTube after the movie to see a comparison. It's just shockingly different on an emotional level. It's not just kind of uncut where it's like, oh, it's gory and bloody. It's like, oh, there's gore. Oh. It's like, no, there is a bunch more gore and it's shockingly visceral and graphic. But the ending isn't uplifting at all. The ending is entirely different. The ending is harrowing and bleak and horrifying. The ending makes up for so much the film is lacking because it is so unflinchingly bleak and dark. And it's like, oh, okay, all right. I can kind of see what the film was trying to do the whole time. The ending is so good in the uncut version, it makes you wish the film was better. Number 7, Beneath the Planet of the Apes. The first sequel to the original film, Beneath is easily the weirdest and most bonkers sequel in the entire original franchise. And that is saying a lot. This film feels like two completely separate films smashed together. The first half of this film is a lazy derivative rehash of the original film. We've got a new astronaut and he's landed on the Planet of the Apes. He looks like a carbon copy budget Charlton Heston. It is shocking how similar he looks, but just in the home brand version. In the, Mum, can we have Charlton Heston? And Mum's like, we have Charlton Heston at home. That's this guy. He is just so very much the home brand version of Charlton Heston. It's awesome how bold and just lazy it was. But they're like, we're just gonna do it again. Charlton Heston, you don't want to come back? Don't worry, we made a clone of you. And he goes through exactly the same things. He crash lands, all of his crew dies, he wanders through the desert, he meets the sexy mute lady from the first film, Nova. He sees the ape civilization, and they're all like, it's Congress, or it's a thing, it's a human thing, but apes. And he's like, oh my god, it's a madhouse. But there's none of that he can speak, and that amazing, emotional, powerful moment where he speaks for the first time, and any of the good stuff. Like, imagine all the things that made the first film good, strip them away, and do it in 45 minutes. He gets captured, he gets caged, he meets Cornelius and Zero from the first film. It's all exactly the same. It is the same film as the first film, but without any of the charm, any of the biting social commentary, and any of the interesting and iconic moments. It is the definition, it is the definitive classic bad sequel of here we go again, it's the same film, but worse in every single way. But that's only the first half of the film. There is an entirely second half of this film that just completely goes off the deep end in the most hilarious, crazy, awesome way possible. We suddenly, out of nowhere, completely abandon the apes as characters whatsoever and start focusing on an underground, beneath the Planet of the Apes, mutant human colony that's prey to and worship an atomic bomb. They are these weird mutant humans that have psychic telekinetic abilities. It's super vague. At times they create like imagery of like fire and lightning, and it looks as good as you can imagine from a film from the 70s. It's glorious stuff. They have human skin masks that they put on to look normal, and when they take them off, they've got these weird, veiny, multicolored, horrific skin disease kind of look. It looks glorious. It's up here. Look at it. It looks good. It's kind of disgusting though. It's really good stuff. These psychic, telekinetic, human mutants control people with their minds. They make people fight each other, and they worship an atomic bomb. The film just goes crazy, and it just goes so hard and fast down into this absolute nonsense, insane world. I deeply respect it. It's super fun, it's super campy and weird. It's absolutely not what you would expect from a sequel to Planet of the Apes. I deeply respect the film for being so dull and uninspired for the first half, and they're just pulling the rug out from under you and being like, how about this unhinged madness? What do you think about that? I love it. This should be number one. This film is awesome. It's not number one, it's terrible. But it's got its charm in that last half. One aspect that I really do enjoy is the psychic mutant humans. They have this really hypocritical way of like fighting people. They're like, we don't fight, we're peaceful. This atomic bomb, it's a peace thing. We're peace people and stuff. We made it for peace or whatever. And you're like, I see you did that, because you didn't. It's not a peace thing, it's a bomb. And so they use their psychic powers to like make other people fight each other. And so we get a moment at the end of the film where Charlton Heston fights budget clone Charlton Heston, and it's a Charlton Heston fight. Also, this film has one of the most nihilistic and depressing and harrowing ends to a film and to a franchise, so they thought, ever. Charlton Heston agreed to come back for the sequel for a very brief cameo at the start and the end, and he agreed to come back as long as he could do one thing. And he does that as the character and the actor who made it happen in the film. Charlton Heston's character gets shot by bullets or something happens or whatever. Everybody's dying, it's chaos and there's action and stuff. Oh, action, it's a generous term. Stuff is happening. The stuff on screen is happening, and he's about to die, and then he hits the button and he sets off the atomic bomb that all the psychic mutants are praying and worshipping, and it goes off, and the film ends with the entire world, everything just exploding. He ends the world with an atomic bomb, and it just happens, and then the film ends and it's just straight to credits. And it is harrowing. It is shockingly bleak. It is really powerful. And so the film ends with the world being destroyed, and Charlton Heston, the actor and the character, ends the second film, but also ends the Ape franchise. With that in mind, number 6, Escape from the Planet of the Apes. Escape is the third film in the original franchise, and I think easily the most ambitious and clever sequel to the original film. I think this film is really entertaining, easily the best sequel, and considering how the second film ended, the fact that this third film came up with a clever and inspired and crazy unhinged way to bring back the franchise, but they brought it back and made it fresh and unique and original all again by essentially just inverting the first film. I have a very deep respect for the writers for creating such a fascinating, yet hilarious and ridiculous, but still very compelling way to continue the franchise after the second film ended, with Charlton Heston, the actor and the character, ending the franchise by blowing up the Planet of the Apes with an atomic bomb. Because what Charlton Heston didn't realize is, despite blowing up the Planet of the Apes, you in fact cannot kill a franchise. when there's still money to be made. This film is a genius twist and inversion of the original film. The original film had 3 astronaut humans landing on the planet of the apes. This film has 3 astronaut apes, ape-astronauts, landing in 70s America. And it is as spectacular as you could possibly expect that to be. How does that happen? Because of the bomb? Something time travel, shut up, who cares? Cinema truly peaked when we got a talking ape from the future coming to 70s America to experience American culture. And it was mostly a shopping montage. I'm honestly not sure cinema ever really truly bounced back. I knew I would absolutely love this movie when the opening scene of this film is the airship, spaceship, whatever, it crash lands and 3 astronauts get out and they think, like, all of America, well, like 10 people or whatever, all the media, and there's like a general sergeant guy there or whatever, he's like, I'm the army. And they get there and they think it's going to be the 3 astronauts from the original film, but then they take the astronaut helmets off and it's apes, giant talking apes, and the music just goes, it's a 70s movie, cinema. That is cinema. It sounds like I'm being sarcastic. I'm not. It's maybe one of the greatest starts to a movie of all time. It's so exciting. It's so unhinged. It's so unexpected. The first time I watched this film, I was like, they just blew up the Planet of the Apes. How are they gonna... There's 3 more of these. Are they gonna be prequels? Like, what is this? And then you realize, no, it's like some kind of inverse time loop situations where they were the Planet of the Apes. They come back in time to create the beginnings of the Planet of the Apes. Something time travel. It's an infinite loop. It's a paradox. It's a... On a Magnus? Is that the snake? It's the snake thing where the snake eats its own tail. I really love how this film handles a lot of the same themes and ideas and concepts of the original film, but it feels like they're doing it in such a fresh and unique way just by reversing the roles of the film. Now it's apes and like normal human America. What would that be like? How would America react to 3 talking apes from the future? They'd become celebrities, baby. Famous talking apes, you know it. There's a lot this film does with celebrity culture and how, as a society, we love to idolize these people, but also maybe tear them down. And just a lot of interesting things about celebrity culture I thought was like kind of surprising and very new for the franchise, but also the talking apes go shopping. There's a shopping montage in this film, and it's literally the best part of the film. The film has a lot of serious themes and ideas that it plays with. The idea of our fear of the unknown and of people who are different to us. The fear of the future and the dangerous things we'll do to try and prevent something that we just don't really understand, we don't know enough about. There's some heavy things about government control, particularly government control to do with like women's birth and like their choice to give birth, which I found really fascinating. I'd completely forgotten, like, you know, because I'm just mostly thinking about the fact that this film has also got monkey shopping montages, and the monkeys, they learn how to get drunk, and that's some fun stuff. But then also a man abuses the drinking thing with the woman ape, and it's not good. The film is shockingly heavy, but also, as I said, shopping montage. That's good. It's good stuff. I do feel like it gets slightly less amazing in like the back third of the film, but wow, oh wow, like every Planet of the Apes film, is that last 5 minutes just horrific, just a horrific ending to this movie. Has any other franchise ever in the history of franchises ended every single film on such a unique, separately different, and wholly original, yet all of them combined are just some of the most bleak, depressing, horrifyingly just awful endings to films of all time. The rest are bleak in kind of almost fun ways, almost kind of crazy ways. This one's just horrible. So the 2 monkeys, Cornelius and Zira, from the original 2 films, they are on the run, they've got a baby, and they do a baby switcheroo, which you're aware of, but still the movie ends with the villain shooting a baby chimp like 5 times. Like, they just shoot and kill a baby chimp in this movie. And then because she doesn't want them to know it's not her smart baby, but just some chimpanzee, she just pushes it into the ocean. It is really depressing. Everybody dies. The film ends like a Tarantino film. There's like 4 people on a boat and they all die. I think this film, including the original, might be the most personal and intimate film, focusing on Cornelius and Zira coming to Earth after 2 films of them being main-ish characters. We really start to focus in on them. It's a really good film and it's a lot of fun for a lot of it. It kind of has that campy fun charm while still being very bleak in a lot of the stuff it's discussing and doing. I feel like it balances that really, really well the way the first film does. And it's easily the best sequel in the original franchise. Number 5, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. This is the 4th film in the Andy Serkis Caesar timeline, and whilst it is a continuation of those films, it feels like it's a film that's setting off a new trilogy set in this world. So we've got entirely new characters, new story, and a new time period. This film is a visual feast for the eyes. What Avatar 2 did for water and the color blue, this film does for the color green and giant rotting cities that are infested with lots of different kinds of plants. It's such a beautiful, breathtaking looking film. If you like the color green, you're going to be very happy. The film's biggest weakness, No Caesar, is also one of the film's biggest strengths. It tells a very compelling and interesting story that is mostly focused around the legacy of Caesar. The villain is fantastic and he totally thinks he's the MVP, but that title goes to Raka, our new orangutan whose soft, silky, smooth voice is just to die for. Every time he talked, it felt like you were just getting a big warm hug as you nestle up by a cozy fire as you drink a hot cup of cocoa. Or if you're like me and you don't like cocoa, a dangerously strong alcoholic beverage. Imagine Morgan Freeman. That guy's voice used to be everyone's favorite voice for narration and just to hear with their ear holes. No, get him out of here. His voice essentially sounds like nails on a chalkboard compared to this orangutan. And the character itself was super awesome. The wisdom and knowledge and point of reference compared to him and Noah was super compelling. I think it's hard to say. It might have just been the voice, if I'm being honest. Unfortunately, it is not as strong as any of the 3 films in the Caesar trilogy, but that is an extremely high bar that was set. Man, oh man, is it exciting to finally be so close to that original timeline from that original Planet of the Apes film from the 60s. What has become of Caesar's ways, Caesar's teachings, Caesar's legacy? What does it mean 300 years later to kind of so cleverly utilize the fact that everyone watching this film who loved that first trilogy is like, yeah, no, it's great, we're continuing on this world, but man, do I miss Caesar. And they're like, well, what about if that's like a main theme of the film? Kind of weaponizing the loss of Caesar and being like, no, but that's a plot point that you couldn't have if Caesar was still here. And it honestly is really clever and really well done. So throughout the film, we get a bunch of different ape tribes, which is all super cool, and they all have very different interpretations or different kind of ways of thinking about Caesar's legacy. Some have forgotten it. Some honor the true way that we remember it from the films, and some disgrace it and besmirch the legacy of Caesar in honestly some pretty horrifying ways. There is one moment in this film where an ape does something to another ape and then says, "For Caesar!" Oh, I got like this involuntary like spasm in my body where I just like shook my fist at the screen. I was like, oh, I'm mad at that ape. I don't. How dare he? Caesar would literally be rolling in his grave. Honestly, it made me so mad. I was like, I almost just wish this film didn't exist because Caesar would be so disappointed with what has become of apes. And then I suddenly was like, that's the point of the film. What am I talking about? That is how effective this movie is at kind of discussing the idea of Caesar's legacy and creating a really fascinating bridge that I never knew I wanted or needed from Caesar's trilogy, where the apes are kind of the heroes, and then leading into that original 60s Planet of the Apes film, in which not so much heroes. It's a really good starting off point for the rest of the trilogy. Or is it? Because there's one aspect of this film that I very much didn't like, and it's pretty close towards the end. In fact, it might be the end cliffhanger. Who's to say? I'm to say I didn't like the twist ending. I think it's an amazing film with a horrible twist ending. And of all 10 Planet of the Apes films, it is the worst ending to any of them. Number 4, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. Finally, we have made it to the spectacular Caesar reboot trilogy, the one with the CGI apes. And this one in particular, I feel like is probably most people's favorite. It's the one where they're riding horses shooting guns. Reloading? Never heard of her. So don't get me wrong, I love this film. I absolutely love this entire trilogy. I love it so very much. It's just kind of a case of like one of the great films has to come last, and this is the one I like to revisit the least. And there's nothing against this film, I just really like 1 and 3. This film though has some spectacular stuff that the other two don't have, in particular Cobra as a villain. Cobra is a spectacular villain. I mean, just visually, I feel like somehow his like CGI looks better than other characters. I don't know if it's just because there's more detail with the scarring on his face. The CGI jump, I feel like there was never a big significant jump in each film, but rewatching them, the jump from 1 to 2 is absurd. It's overwhelming. It's really, really cool. Like that first shot where you see he's got the war paint on and it pans out and there's 100 of them and there's the big bear and Cobra's like, bam, one hit the bear. Ugh. But yeah, the Cobra arc as he kind of becomes the villain of the piece and his hatred for humans just kind of overwhelms him, and it's just all of that stuff and his kind of conflict with Caesar in the film is of course the absolute highlight of the film. It's emotionally rich and dense, and it does every single thing that the 5th film in the original franchise, Battle, tried to do with the main gorilla guy, whose name I can't even remember. Like, it's clearly riffing on that idea, but I feel like the thing that makes me not like this as much as the other films is all of the human characters are super forgettable. Like, I really like all of the cast, but just all of them are just a bit like nothing, and they don't really give me enough. And I really like that the focus of this trilogy is on Caesar, and each film has different humans, kind of showing how irrelevant they are to his story in some ways, like each specific person, just humans as this general kind of antagonistic force as a whole. And I really like all of that it's separate, different people each time that he interacts with, but I think these humans are the weakest ones. But that being said, there is one human moment in this film that I absolutely love, and it's with Commissioner Gordon, who is so underdeveloped. It's crazy that this scene has any effect on you whatsoever, but they finally get the lights back on. He has this moment where his phone or his like tablet or whatever finally comes back on again, and he sees his family, and he does a classic happy, sad, good acting cry. And it's just such a powerful moment of like, oh yeah, like we take so many photos with technology now, so we don't just have photos the way that like my mum would have photos. So she'd have photos of all the family still without technology, but nowadays we rely on technology for so many things that simply remembering what his kids' faces look like, and that heartbreak, but that kind of beautiful smile of like, oh, I finally get to see him again, but it makes him sad, so he does a big happy, sad cry. It's kind of maybe the best scene in the whole movie. It's really, really good, and it's just kind of really powerful, and it just speaks to so many different little things. I feel like I'm talking too much about a scene about a human I don't care about when I should be focusing on Caesar and Cobra. I love how this film takes the concept and like the phrase and ideology of the 5th movie, Battle, ape does not kill ape. It's just like a really simple and effective kind of moment for their culture where there's like, hey, we might be fighting humans and they all suck or whatever, but we do not hurt each other. And all of that comes to a head with Cobra, and Caesar learns that ape does not kill ape. Unless ape assassinates ape, and then leads apes into uprising that kills a lot of apes, and then kills one specific minor character ape as like a show of power. And then ape can kill ape. As long as that ape doing the killing is me, Caesar, the leader, the ruler, the best ape. And after that, no more ape killing ape. That's what I want from a leader. A leader who's like, this is the rules. And unless someone breaks the rules against me, then I can break the rules back. But then no one else can break the rules. Because I am actually the leader. Dictator? I don't love the ending. Just in the fact that it's not super bleak. Like the Rise has a very bleak ending. And this has a very bleak start, kind of bleeding them together. But the ending is like, yeah, it's melancholy, where he's like, oh, there's a war coming and we can't escape it. But he did beat Cobra. Like, he beat him and he kind of won the day. And he's kind of like, wow, there's going to be a war coming and that's sad. And it's a bleak ending. I'm like, not by Apes standards. Maybe by general film standards, it's still a bit of an Empire Strikes Back. But for Ape standards, considering how bleak and harrowing and horrifying all of them are, unless they're stupid dumb, but that's a different fun thing, it's just not bleak enough. Number 3, Rise of the Planet of the Apes. The first of the Andy Serkis Caesar reboot, remake, reimagining, reinvention, whatever you want to call it. This one I think is easily the most underrated in the franchise. The emotional journey we go on with Caesar in this film is just so exciting. It's so emotional. I really love all of the human stuff with him and James Franco, Third Rock from the Sun guy, the dad, Trinity killer, if you will. All of that stuff is really great. And then suddenly it takes such a horrifying turn when he gets put in prison. And then the film essentially becomes the great Ape-scape. Yes, I am the first person to make that joke. And he slowly kind of becomes the revolutionary leader, Caesar, that we know from the fourth film, Conquest. And the way it kind of riffs off that fourth film, but does it in such a new, fresh way, I just think it's exceptional. Andy Serkis as Caesar is obviously one of the greatest mocap CGI guy doing a thing, but then we CGI his face performances of all time. It's probably one of Andy Serkis's greatest performances ever. Maybe his best. Wait, no. It's his best excluding, obviously, Gollum, King Kong, that chef he played in King Kong, Supreme Leader Snoke from everybody's favorite Star Wars films. Oh, that time he played young, sexy Snoke in Andor. Did I mention the chef he played in King Kong? I think the thing that really sets this apart from the second one and even the third one, there is just something inherently kind of tragic and heartbreaking about watching this first film, just knowing where it inevitably kind of has to go. But when you take it so realistically and you're like, he's a chimp. He might be a smart chimp, but he's still a chimp. And there's still going to be that point where he kind of gets to that age that all chimps do, that anytime anyone has kept a chimp as a pet, there's always a point when they become a teenager and then they rip your balls off and they try and eat you because they're just kind of animalistic monsters and they're kind of scary. And they seem so cute and innocent at first, but there's just a turning point. There's a turning point that makes human teenagers seem kind of not that bad. I mean, they're still horrifying. You know, when you're walking down like the street and you see like 3 teenagers and you're like, I'm going to cross to the other side of the street because they might stab me or worse, bully me and call me some kind of name. They might be like, nice beanie. And I'll be like, oh God, I thought it was a nice beanie. Clearly it's not a nice beanie. I really do like the start, but man, does this film kick off when he gets into the ape prison. There are a couple of just montages and moments as he slowly kind of has to overcome being bullied because he's wearing the clothes. They're like, you're silly, you're wearing a sweater vest, you stupid human ape. And he slowly kind of becomes the big boss of the prison, and it kind of goes through a classic kind of prison arc, and then a great ape escape. There, I did it again. I'm so clever. There is just something so exciting about this entire part of the film, and Draco Malfoy suddenly becomes the villain of the movie, and whilst he definitely doesn't nail the classic, iconic, greatest line in cinema history, get your stinking paws off him, you damn dirty ape, you know, with that classic inflection that I gave it, I still feel like it totally works because it's kind of like a moment where he says it and you're like, I said the finger on the thing. But it's like a setup. It's almost a fake out for easily, I think, the best part of any Apes film of this trilogy, sorry. There is nothing more emotional, more horrifying, but exciting and just intense and overwhelmingly powerful than when Caesar just goes, no! And he speaks for the first time. And we get a really clever reverse inversal of Charlton Heston from the original film speaking for the first time, saying the line that Draco Malfoy had just said. I just love how they switch it and they give the ape the big, powerful, he spoke for the first time. I don't think the casting of James Franco is like that inspired. It feels like a really weird, odd choice. Strictly from just a performance standpoint, I don't really feel like James Franco brings the emotional gravitas to the role or really screams scientist who can cure Alzheimer's. And one person came to mind. I'm going with James McAvoy. I know, I can hear it. You're all applauding me. You're like, oh, ingenious, inspired. Have I ruined the movie now? Because you're like, every time you watch it, like, God, imagine it was James McAvoy. A man who can actually act good. Oh, that would have been crazy. The ape riot on the San Francisco bridge, spectacular, incredible. I love how they utilized the bridge and all the apes used their kind of ape climbing skills to do a bunch of stuff. And in classic Apes legacy tradition, it ends with a harrowing, devastatingly bleak, sad ending. And I also absolutely love that this movie ends with like 100, 200 apes just running into a forest and they're like, that's the end. And Caesar's like, Caesar is home. And James Franco's like, I'm trying to act, but I don't know how to act. And the movie ends and you're like, God, that's a good movie. So how do the apes take over the planet? They don't just go into the forest and machine gun everybody. How does this happen? That guy earlier on, virus. And then we get like a Indiana Jones style red lines going across the map and the virus just spreads and it kills all the humans. Caesar's home. 200 apes live in the forest now. Also, a virus wiped out 98% of the entire world. Everybody's dead. Everybody is dead and it was horrifying. Number 2, war. for Planet of the Apes. This film has the best score in any Apes film. I think it is just some of the most powerful emotional music. I just really love the absolutely quiet soft piano, and then the same music but it's a big orchestra going loud. It does stuff to my brain earwaves. I really like it. The visual effects in this movie, the jump from 2 to 3 is crazy. The jump from 1 to 2 was shocking, but the jump from 2 to 3, any issues in wide shots or this or that, just anything with the apes, completely gone now. They are just actual chimpanzees and gorillas running about with the orangutan that was always real. It is just so crazy how good they look now. I'm overwhelmed by it. But I'm not so overwhelmed that the visual effects and the music overwhelm from any plot points, any literal plot holes that may or may not be in this film. I just ignore them because I love so much of this film, and any issues it has, I'm like, I don't care! Because this film has one of my favorite tropes in film. The grizzled old man who has to learn to get back his humanity from a young innocent child as they go on some kind of road trip. And in this film, it's like, what if the old grizzled man was an old grizzled ape, and there's 4 of them, they're on horses, and there's a little girl, but she's mute because we've come to that point in the franchise where all the humans have stopped talking. The visual of seeing 4 different types of apes riding horses as they just traverse the landscape, and that soft dun 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 dun. To say that excites me is an understatement. After Caesar suffers a huge tragedy at the start of the film, it's a really interesting arc to take him on in this final film as he just goes on a crazy revenge traversal through landscapes. And it just does some really great stuff. Like, I just really like all of that stuff. And then we kind of do a big callback to the first movie where the back half of the film is once again the great ape-scape. And yes, I am the first person to make that joke. The setting of this film for like the back half all being set in the snow, I just think is really visually interesting, and I just love things that are set in the snow, and I like how it visually sets it apart from the other films. Woody Harrelson is easily the best human villain in this franchise. I actually love him so much in this movie. I think I like him as much as Cobra. I think Cobra does a lot more in terms of how he pushes Caesar as our main character, and that kind of contrast is probably stronger, or it's definitely stronger. But just Woody Harrelson in this movie is super chilling, super upsetting. He's a classical bad guy, but like all good bad guys, he thinks he's the good guy. And I just absolutely love the idea that throughout this film, all the humans have started to kind of deal with the virus mutating, and they've started to lose the ability to speak. And Woody Harrelson, he's gone rogue, he's gone Ethan Hawke Mission Impossible rogue, and he's starting to kill all the people who have this new mutation, this new virus that is making them mute, kind of leading us full circle to that original Planet of the Apes film. I can understand exactly where he's coming from, but it's really horrifying to see him just murder them all, and just the way he goes about it, that story he tells Caesar about his son being one of the first ones who can't speak, just super chilling. One of those classic evil, great character monologues, and the way it's kind of the entire human conflict is he's gone out as his own, and there's this human other conflict coming to stop him, and it really focuses in and kind of hammers home once again that even though the apes have been fighting humans, the end of the world with all of the humans dying is mostly due to humans doing things. Humans' hubris to try and save the Trinity Killer. Shouldn't have done it, James Franco. Humans fighting humans, humans being so dumb that they're all just chanting and cheering, and an avalanche comes and kills them. And the only reason the apes survive is because they use their natural ape ability to climb and hold onto trees because they're more about nature or something. Metaphors and symbolism. It's blunt, it's obvious, it's very on the nose, but this franchise, at its very best, had lines like, well, you know, human see, human do, ha ha ha. Subtlety was never Planet of the Apes' strongest strength or thing it was concerned about. It's always been blunt, obvious symbolism, metaphors, and allegories and all those big words or whatever. And so I feel like this very blunt and obvious end reinforces all the things that I really like about this franchise. Because when you think about a Planet of the Apes, how are the apes ever going to take out all the humans? They don't! Humans take out humans. And for this film, I think it is a fittingly bleak, but not bleak ending. Like, it's a super uplifting ending, but it makes me so sad that Caesar dies. Like, it makes me so upset when he just kind of goes, oh, actually, that arrow from before, now got me good. I'm like, after so much stuff and so much heartbreak and tragedy throughout this film, I would have loved him to like enjoy the oasis they found with the apes and die of old age. Number 1, Planet of the Apes. Perfection. A film that has so much to say in thought-provoking and powerful ways about faith versus science, government control, animal cruelty, the dangers of man's violent and self-destructive nature. But also, talking apes, riding horses, shooting guns. What more do you want? This film has one of, if not the most iconic twist ending of any film ever. Deeply harrowing and heartbreaking, yet visually sensational and fittingly campy, over the top, and kind of hilarious in its own little way. That end does a lot for me. It's maybe one of my favorite visuals of a film ever. It's honestly so good, and of course it's coupled with not just an amazing visual and shock twist ending that, we see coming in kind of a modern lens. You can kind of obviously see what's going to happen, but I still feel like it is such a deeply satisfying twist for the film itself to contextualize the whole film, but also for our main character. What more do you want from a film? How about two of the most iconic lines in cinema history? Sure, the one at the end is spectacular, and I do love the visual image of him just smashing his hand into the sand and there's water going everywhere and he's just like, no! Starting a fantastic tradition of Planet of the Apes films ending with something truly bleak and devastating and just horrifying. Just a horrifyingly bleak ending. But my favorite line in this film, and maybe one of my favorite lines in any film ever, is of course Charlton Heston's classic line the first time he speaks in front of the apes. "Get your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape." Good stuff. It gets me. It gets my blood boiling. It makes me go, it's a good line, but also it's kind of so ridiculous and over the top. It's so theatrical. It is just a fantastic collection of words all put together into a sentence. It's a sentence I like. This film isn't just the best Planet of the Apes film. It is one of the best films of all time. A true cinematic masterpiece. And so in honor of the depressing and bleak and sad endings to the Planet of the Apes films, particularly the original 5, I thought what better way to end this ranking review deep dive of the entire franchise than end on a fittingly depressing note. So a couple of years before Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes reboot, we were going to get an Arnold Schwarzenegger Planet of the Apes film. I just want to leave you with a depressing and sad realization that at one point in cinema history, we were probably going to get Arnold Schwarzenegger in a Planet of the Apes film, which means we would have got Arnold Schwarzenegger delivering the classic iconic line, "Get your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape!" And if that isn't the biggest crime in cinema history, I don't know what is.